Is that less is more approach always the best approach when it comes to product features?
You always want to give more, thinking it's going to push them over the edge. But what it actually leads to is people get confused and they get decision paralysis.
You get asked, what's one product that you absolutely love and why? And whenever I've gotten that question, I always say it's Dropbox.
How do you keep it simple? And what do you eliminate? And they're tough questions.
You have to know who your audience is, and you have to build to that demographic.
POV edit, product simplicity, more or less. In looking at this quest for perfection, I don't like perfection. For the quest for like simplicity, the less is more approach. Is that less is more approach always the best approach when it comes to product features?
Well, in my experience, I actually do think less is more. Like, you could get tempted to give all this extra stuff. People always want more. You always want to give more, thinking it's going to push them over the edge. But what it actually leads to is people get confused and they get decision paralysis. It's too much all at once, and they actually end up not doing anything. So less is more actually is the gold standard.
Yeah, I would totally agree that less is usually more. If you have a product,
You said usually.
and I look at my current, usually, sometimes, when it comes to like technical products, whether it's like tools for developers to use, like for creating products, or certainly in some very technical fields, you might need products that are incredibly complex and have every bell and whistle that's needed, that's possible for doing what they need to do. I think that for most business applications, and most end user applications, that there's definitely an aspect, a huge value to less is more, where you give the customer exactly what they need and don't add on to it. If you've got thoughts on what could be the next great feature, sure, do your due diligence to see if that's what your current customer base or your desired customer base is looking for, and then work towards that. But even as you're adding new features or adding new products to a portfolio, you can still keep things pretty simple. We often, and I don't know, product managers, sometimes during interview questions, you get asked, what's one product that you absolutely love and why? And whenever I've gotten that question, I always say it's Dropbox. When Dropbox first started, its value to me was in its simplicity. It did what it did, and it did it really well. And I still think today that sure, they're adding stuff in, but it's just dead simple to use. And there's not a ton of complexity there, which I think is part of its value.
This whole thing is like, I've learned to do MVPs because I have to, because honest to God, I have a really hard time keeping it simple. Like, I know theoretically you just want to keep it simple and keep it to the minimal, and I'm constantly telling clients to do that. But for me, I always want to get that flashy thing in. I always want to get that, like, I want to get parity with all the other competitors, and then I also want to get my own thing in, and it's obviously impossible. So I don't know. It's something I battle with like literally every day in this career. It's just, how do you keep it? How do you do that? How do you keep it simple? And what do you eliminate? And they're tough questions. What do you eliminate to make it, to get something shipped? I don't know. It's a challenge for sure.
Apple's often recognized as to being a great example of simplicity in their products and their product design. I guess that let me pose the question: can you only achieve that kind of true great simplicity in a product if you have a closed ecosystem like Apple? I figure I'll leave that one with you, Drew, since you were already
Yeah,
pontificating and on the how of achieving.
yeah, no, it's a good question. Um, you know, one of the advantages of the way things are moving now is it is getting a lot easier to interact and interoperate. Um, back in the day when you're talking about like Mac versus Windows, um, there were so many, like, you could plug and play, the whole plug and play thing that they had. It would find it and ideally install it, and then it never really worked, and then you had to go find drivers and all that. It's a nightmare. Um, but I think, especially in terms of all the web stuff, is technology has kind of settled for now. Things will obviously change, but it's like JavaScript is still kind of the main web programming language, and people are using JSON and that for interoperability and REST APIs, and I think that has made it a lot easier to do things. In fact, it's made it really easy to build things quickly because you can just plug in an API and all of a sudden you have a whole new feature in your app. So I don't think it's as critical as it used to be, but it certainly is easier if you're just working, if you're just committing to your own thing. I mean, I saw, not to bring it back to the AI design tools, but a lot of those tools were competitors to Figma. And so they were just finding ways, how can we differentiate? And so they built these kind of things in, um, because there can only be so many things. And then they ended up having to make it interoperable with Figma so that you can import your things into Figma to do, to export into React or whatever. So, um, yeah, it's a good question and it helps, but I think it is getting easier to have an open environment.
I would say it's definitely getting easier to have an open environment. And I mean, look, Google Android phones are probably just as easy and elegant to use these days as an Apple iPhone. So do you have to? And Google is the epitome of what an open ecosystem might be on a phone. So I don't think you have to have a closed system for some, or a closed ecosystem for to have that simplicity. It can help, especially in the early days of something. But like Drew was saying, with all these APIs out there, with all that you can access to do things, you kind of have to be open in many aspects. Um, so in healthcare, a lot of it is closed ecosystems because, like when I was working on medical devices that have embedded software, they have to be closed because you can't have interoperability with other things because that just brings in risk in having those products open. So sometimes you have to have that counterbalance of, I want it closed for certain reasons and keep it simple, or let it be open and you take those risks of having it open, whether that's from a complexity or a complexity point of view, or from just a features and wants that customers have for your product.
Something you were saying earlier, Faluke, where you were saying, kind of talking about the less is more as one of those aspirational goals. I kind of wanted to poke at that a little bit more, in that, like, the simplicity in design always lead to a better user experience. Always. I guess the thing I have in my mind as I ask this question is, I'm thinking Adobe Photoshop, After Effects, Premiere, the world I've been in the past few days.
Well, I won't say it's always less is more. Like, I won't say that's true most of the time. It truly depends on the audience that you're catering to. If you're catering to simply end users, I feel less is always more because you don't know their background. You don't know how comfortable they are with whatever you're producing. But if this product is for a specific group of people, that their background, for example, like you said, Photoshop, I won't, not everyone will pick up Photoshop and expect to be able to use it. You have to have some sort of experience or sort of know what you're doing. as opposed to going online to a, I don't know. I'm trying to find an example here, but going online to an open source thing and having all these bells and whistles thrown at you, it's very confusing, especially if I don't know anything. For me, if you're catering to an end user that might have no idea, less is always better. You want to help them get to the end. And if you throw too much at them, they're going to get distracted and they're going to leave.
Do you have like, as you're kind of talking through some of these examples, do you have like any specific products in mind?
Well, I have to use like what I'm familiar with, and that is like mixed tiles. They have a really, really simple approach. You go in, you upload a photo, you choose your frame, and you check out. Now, they have all these other products that are in the background, but that they're very devoted into just that one line. Just go in, choose your photo, add a frame, and check out. They're not overcomplicating it. And you could get tempted to overcomplicate it because people always want more. You're looking at people and you're like, I could fix that, I could make it better, but it's not always the way to go. Sometimes just that single path is just the best way, at least with my experience.
I actually have a funny story about this. There was I worked with a company, they were a fintech company, and they handled managing the assets for banks when they were doing commercial properties, so the environmental inspections and all that kind of stuff. And so it was mainly bankers. So we, like, as consultants, we went sort of in and we're like, we're going to make this great app and it's going to be so cool and simple and user friendly. And we got our designers and we did all this and we made this big whiz bang thing. And in the end, they're bankers and they wanted something that looked like Excel. They hated it. And we ended up just like deconstructing it and making like this giant sort of Airtable looking thing. But that's what they wanted because that's the user and they're used to using Excel and that's where they're comfortable. So sometimes that's what you have to do.
Does listening to the customer and doing inevitably lead to too much complexity?
I guess it depends how much you listen to.
A little bit. Well, listening to them probably will not lead to complexity. Acting on everything will lead to the complexity.
But I guess to that, can a product I guess you do want to listen to your customers. You're trying to solve for their problem and the business problem, right? But can the product be both? Can it both meet their needs and maybe even be highly customizable while still being simple at the same time? Or are those goals just inherently in conflict?
I mean, I think so. I think, I've worked with other things. One of the tools we worked with was a mobile tool for like creators, mostly like journalistic style. This was probably, 7 years ago or so. And the way that we had them entering things wasn't quite working. They didn't like it. And so, we played around with some different options and tested it with them. And, in the end, when we, had a new way to sort of create their new media, they loved it. And our user rates went up and, fewer people abandoned and all that kind of good stuff. So, definitely it helps and you can interpret it, but you have to interpret it correctly.
At one of my previous companies that I worked for, we created connected smart pill bottles to help patients remember take their medications. And an overarching goal of the company was...
Wait, hold on. I gotta stop you. I got questions. I've got questions. Hold on a sec. So are you saying there was a pill bottle, okay, pill bottle that had Bluetooth connectivity?
So when I was there, it did not have Bluetooth. It actually had cellular connectivity.
Awesome.
And that goes to my point of being dead simple. The overarching goal, yes, it was a bottle that had cellular connectivity, and it beeped at you, and it lit up when it was time to take your medications. And it had cellular communications, so the back-end software knew if the bottle wasn't opened at the right time for a patient to take their dose. But one of the overarching goals was we knew the customer profile was somebody who was probably somewhere between 50 and 80 years old, who may not be the most tech savvy kind of a person. The younger people who needed to remember to take medications, they were probably using apps on their phone, is what our discovery found. But the older people may not be as comfortable setting reminders on their phone or whatever. So yes, they got this bottle that beeped at them and lit up, and they would get a text message that said, "Hey, we saw that you missed your dose. Is everything okay?" But there was a conscious decision to make it so that there was no app that was associated with the bottle. Nothing that the customer had, that the patient had to do. It was all set up for them. And if they needed a change in how it was working, whether it was their dosage schedule changed or whatever, they just picked up the phone or texted, said, "Hey, my doctor said to change this." And we would end up changing it for them on the back end. Oftentimes we'd have to connect with their oncologist or whatnot in order to make sure that it was correct. But there a conscious decision was made to keep it super simple for the end user who was the patient.
I gotcha. I'm still thinking about how many other things I can have in my house with Bluetooth on them. I guarantee, to the chagrin of my wife, everything in my house is connected. I had to get rid of the garbage can that was also connected to the Wi-Fi. That one had to go.
Totally agree with you. You have to know who your audience is, and you have to build to that demographic. If that demographic has, if they need the bells and whistles, if they want the bells and whistles, then yes. But if that demographic, if the point is just this one simple thing, you don't need to overcomplicate it. They don't want that, and they don't need it.
Your go-to platform for all things product management, connecting you with industry leaders, trendsetters, and a global community of insights and unique perspectives. This is The Product Way. This show is brought to you by The Product Group. The Product Group isn't just another meetup. It's a thriving community that's been the go-to hub for product enthusiasts since 2009. Whether you're a product manager in a startup, a designer in a Fortune 500, a seasoned chief officer, or a student aspiring to break into the industry, the Product Group has a seat for you at the roundtable. It's a diverse community where you'll find a blend of fresh perspectives and seasoned wisdom, covering everything from the latest industry trends to timeless best practices. If you're ready to elevate your game and enrich your network, head over to meetup.com/pro/theproductgroup and join a chapter near you today. Are you looking to elevate your brand in the product management space? Partner with The Product Way, the go-to product management channel featuring a variety of shows. Highlight your brand and be part of the conversations that are shaping the future of product management. Contact us at jhorn, that is JHORN, at theproductguy.com.